just a few sort of administrative things here. You'll see along in the interface for GoToWebinar, there is an option to raise your hand and an option to ask questions. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, you can just raise your hand or else ask a question in the little questions panel, and I can unmute you and we can discuss your question. If you have a question that you don't want to bring up in front of other people and on the call, you can just email otsupport@acws.ca and I will answer your email that way, answer your question that way. Though I doubt that there'll be any of that, but if there is, you can do that. That's pretty much all I think for the administrative stuff. You are all on mute, so if you have anything to say, you have to raise your hand or send a question to let me know some way that you have something to say. And so let's talk about what this webinar is. As you know from the description, this is sort of a 2-for-1. Both of the subjects that we're going to talk about, they're small-ish, but they're not, but they're still important. But I don't think that either one will take very long to cover. So we just sort of smushed them together into one webinar. And so first I want to start talking about supported referrals. And then I want to talk about managing documents in Outcome Tracker. So I'll go ahead and get started with supported referrals. Let me go ahead and show my screen. So you should be able to see my screen now. So supported referrals are how we track what is being done with ICM funding in general, and more specifically, how outcome numbers are affected by our turnaways. What we're really interested in with supported referrals is how many people are request admission in a shelter, are turned away because of lack of capacity to support them, but then receive outreach support as part of their request. So there has been some confusion about how to track things like these in Outcome Tracker for our shelters. So I want to clear that up. Another thing that I should say administratively is that there is a handout. You'll notice on your GoToWebinar interface that there's a section for handouts. There's a PDF document in there that will go over what we're discussing today, the supported referrals and the managing documents. So that is there for you to look at. And also this webinar I will publish on YouTube shortly after this webinar. This video will be available on YouTube, so you could disseminate it amongst your staff and at shelter if you want to, or you yourself can use it for reference if you need to. If that doesn't happen today, then it'll probably be tomorrow, and then I'll send out an email with that information, with the link. So just a couple more things that I forgot to mention at the top. Anyway, back to supported referrals. So the way you want to track supported referrals, as I say in the handout, that to be counted as a supported internal referral, the client must meet these requirements, have a call to contact in which the type of request is a residential admission request and not admitted, and also provided a supported referral to another program authored by the shelter. They must have an outreach admission completed, and the outreach must be enrollment linked to the call contact with these specifications. So let's go ahead and open up a call contact. So basically, type of request must be residential admission, not admitted, reason not admitted, will probably be unable to accommodate due to capacity. After that, these are less important. Of course, you want number of dependent children. And then here we have, was caller provided a supported referral to another program? Yes, that has to be yes. So those are the requirements for call contact. Residential admission request not admitted, unable to accommodate. Either any of these will work, but it will almost certainly be unable to accommodate due to capacity. And then supported was caller was provided a supported internal referral. So we would save this. I'm not going to save this because there's stuff that will not filled out that will prevent me from saving it. It's not worth the time going through to save it. But you would normally have these things filled out too, length of call, so on and so forth. Then in order for them to count as a supported internal referral, they have to have a outreach intake filled out as normal with all this information, and then enrollment linked to that call contact that was a denied admission request. Then they will show up as a supported internal referral in our reporting, and also an outreach client. But they'll show up as an outreach client anyway, regardless of if you enrollment link, as long as they have this filled out. So in a nutshell, that is the supported internal referral, which is how we track ICM funding and the impact of outreach on clients who were not admitted into shelter. So I guess the question now is, are there any questions about that? If you have a question, you can raise your hand in the GoToWebinar, or you can write out your question in the questions box here. And then I will see it and we can discuss. So I'll just give you a moment to do that if you have any questions. Okay, it seems that there are no questions. Everybody seems to be clear, which is good. So for future, you know that the way to make sure that you, oh wait, there's a question. So we have a question from Noreen that the person who took the call should complete the outreach admission rather than passing it on to the outreach worker. You could do that. That would be a way to ensure that the outreach admission is linked back to the call contact correctly. Otherwise, I think within some shelters, I mean, some shelters and some callers, I'd say most shelters and most callers, it'd be pretty easy to understand which call contact leads to the enrollment. And so the person who links it doesn't necessarily have to be the person who took the call contact, who took the call. It could be the outreach worker assigned to the case. Or else they could confer with the person who took the call to make sure that it's the same. But the linking is the same as with the residential intake. You should be linking your residential intake to the calls that resulted in admission too. The only difference with this is that you have to make sure that the enrollment that's linked is the one that was where they are marked as providing a supported internal referral, having been provided a supported internal referral. Okay, let's see. I have another question. So we have a question from Patty, who says that their ICM funding is used in a slightly different way. Answer to your question, Patty, if you're saying that, I might have to look into that for you, because I don't remember off the top of my head what the filtering for the ICM queries have, if they stop at just saying yes to internal referral and have the enrollment linking, or if they go further and say that it has to be an admission request. So let me just make a note here. Okay, sorry about that. I just want to make sure I get that down. And no, it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So let's move on to managing documents in Outcome Tracker. Okay, so some people don't know that you can actually store documents in Outcome Tracker. And this could be really helpful for those shelters who are trying to go paperless. So if you have digital forms, you can fill them out digitally and then store them on Outcome Tracker if you want to. There are also any number of things that you might want to store on Outcome Tracker that are client specific or not client specific. So let's talk about that. Basically, there are two kinds of ways that you can store documents on Outcome Tracker. There are documents that are client specific. That is documents that are related to a particular person in the database. And there are documents that are not client specific, or as I call it, general agency documents. And those might be things like training manuals or blank forms, blank surveys, blank forms, like a blank intake form, that you might want to keep on Outcome Tracker for reference, but they aren't necessarily relevant to a specific individual. So those can be stored on Outcome Tracker too. So let's walk through documents for specific individuals, and then we'll get to agency specific documents. So you'll see on this person's file, there is a tab called Documents right here. And if I click on that, then I'm led to a page where this person only has one document associated with their account, but there could be many documents associated with their account. So that is, but before we get into the functionality of this tab, I want to show you how to set it up, because most people, I find most shelters don't have this tab set up yet. So we'll walk through that. By default, you have a Documents tab. So if you go to Setup, Define Tabs, and you usually have to have admin privileges to do this. So if you don't have admin privileges, then you might not be able to do this. But if you go to Setup, Define Tabs, there is a Documents tab that is sort of standard to Outcome Tracker. When you, like day one, sign into Outcome Tracker, you have a handful of tabs already there, and this is one of them. However, it's not configured to actually show up for anyone when you first log in. So you will have to do that yourself. Otherwise, you can just create a new tab and make that a Documents tab. So we'll walk through how to do that. So in order to do that, you would just add new tab at the bottom of the list, call it something, let's just call it that. Tab, people, organization, color, you can change the color if you want, but the important part is the component. We want it to be Documents. I'll just click Add. And then you have to actually go to that tab. It doesn't take you there automatically. It'll be the last one because I just added it. So with the default Documents tab in this tab that we just created, this is what we have. Right now, it's not configured to show up for anybody, but we can configure it to show up for particular roles. I find that if you have a Documents tab, you're probably going to want it to show up for everybody. So I would just click Show on All People, Show on All Organizations, and click Update. But if you don't want to do that, if you only want it to show for particular people, perhaps you don't want it to show up for children at all, that would make sense. If you would want any documents pertaining to children to be filed exclusively under the adult, you can just choose whatever roles you want this tab to show up for. And that way it's just like a regular tab, a form tab that you might have experience creating an outcome tracker. So let's say we don't want it to show up for children. We'll just put in all the adult roles. There we go. And then we would just click Update. I'm not going to save this because I already have a Documents tab. So I was just walking through this to show you. So I'm not going to save it because then that will be redundant to have two. So once you have your Documents tab set up, we can go back to here. So you can click on your Documents tab, and anything you upload this way, going to people, organizations, searching for a person, and then clicking Documents on the Documents tab that you created, anything you upload in this way will be associated with this person. So this is a good way to store things like maybe danger assessment results. I know some people store filled out copies of intake forms that they have. You can store that. Anything that pertains particularly to this client, follow-up surveys, things like that, or like consents, signed consent forms, you can upload here. So in order to upload, you would just hit Upload Documents, and then you'll be taken to this interface. You can choose files, and in that way, it's just like a email attachment interface you're probably very familiar with. So you just do that and then click Close, and it will upload that document, or else you can drag and drop files here. It's the same. It's pretty much the same thing, whichever is easier for you. If you have multiple files that you want to upload at the same time, you can just select them all and put them in here. And once you upload it, you can do a few things with it. One, you can download it again, and that way it's sort of like saving it in the cloud. You can add a description. So let's say the file name isn't enough to give the information that I want. I could say, oh, this form was completed on February 27th, 2019. Give a little bit more information about what that is. You could notes and portals are probably not terribly useful or helpful right now. So so that's just sort of the interface for documents for pertaining to a particular person. So the other thing is documents pertaining to the shelter, or like more general documents that are not related to a particular person. But before we get into that, I'll take a pause and ask if anybody has any questions. Okay, we have a question here. So Patty says that their shelter scans files before destroying them when they're older than 6 years. Yeah, if you wanted to store those in Outcome Tracker, the scanned files, you could definitely do that. So if there are no more questions, let's move on to documents that are shelter specific. So in order to upload documents that are more shelter oriented and not as much geared to a particular individual, you have to go to setup, which means that some people will not be able to do this. You can give access, usually it's just administrators that have access to the setup tab. You can give access to basic users to the option to work with documents, which is where we need to go on the setup tab without giving them access to anything else on here. So if you want to do that, you can do that in permissions and security groups and permissions. I'm not going to get into that in this webinar because that can be sort of a tricky thorn to unravel and it's so individual that even if I did go into it, it likely wouldn't be applicable to most of you. So I'm just going to say that if you want help configuring your securities and permissions to allow non-administrative users or basic users to have access to this function, to just email otsupport@acws.ca and we can arrange a time to walk through it together. Because security groups and permissions are different in each shelter, it doesn't really make sense to go through it. Go through how to do a very particular thing with everybody because it'll be different for everybody. So, having said that, if you want to upload or manage documents related to a particular, not related to a particular person, but more general for your shelter, you go to setup, work with documents, and here we have every document uploaded. So for instance, the one that we just uploaded as a practice is here. The name it's associated with is Redbird. This is fake data, by the way. It's not, Redbird is not a real person. Well, I'm sure somebody out there exists with the name Redbird, but this is not referring to them. So if I wanted to find a document, I could just search here. If I wanted to download the document, I could download it here. So this would be a good place to store things like manuals, blank survey forms, anything that you might want to use for reference. You could find it here. So you'll also notice that it tells you how much space that you have in Outcome Tracker. By default, you get 100 megabytes, 10 megabytes, or roughly 5,000 pages of information. That is not a lot. You can definitely store a fair amount of information there, but it's not a huge amount. But you can purchase 80 gigabytes a month, 80 gigabytes from VistaShare for $30 a month. That is a significantly larger amount of space, probably more than you will ever need. I am hesitant to say that will definitely be more than you will ever need, but most likely you'll never get that high especially if you're just doing PDFs, Word docs, Excel or comma separated values, documents, it'll take you a very, very long time to get up to 80 gigs. So that's something if you're seriously considering using VistaShare or Outcome Tracker in that capacity, you might want to consider upgrading. But that is something you can do. So that is how you would manage documents for the shelter, documents that are not specifically related to a particular individual. So that is all for managing documents, I believe. Let me make sure I hit all the points. Yeah, I think that's everything. So if there are any questions, let me know. I'll give you a minute to type it in or raise your hand, and then we can address your questions. All right, doesn't seem like there are any questions. Also want to just go back to, let's go back to Redbird's file. And so we can see that that file is still there. I just want to make it clear that it's stored there and I can download it. If I were to log onto another device, I could download it as long as I was able to log in on that device to Outcome Tracker and get to this record. I could download it again, so it's useful for document storage. You don't have to store it all on your hard drive. You can have it in the cloud, as they say. And with that, I think we have a question. Where can we print off the manual you referenced? So if you uploaded a manual onto Outcome Tracker, you could, and it's not specific to a person. If it's a manual, it probably wouldn't be. So you could go to Setup, Work with Documents like we did before. And let's say this is a manual. It's not, it's the quarterly stats form, which some of you may be familiar with. But let's say it is a manual and we could download it here and then we could print it from here too by going here or else hitting Control P. And then we'll be presented with the print dialog. And that is how you would print it. Oh, sorry. She meant the training documents for this webinar. Well, either way, it's both those things are useful for you to know. So, these documents, the manual that I have here, the document I referenced in this call, is actually available on the handout section of this webinar. So you'll see in the GoToWebinar interface, there's a handout section. And there's a PDF in there. That's this PDF. It's the same exact thing. But I'm also going to send out an email to all the OT admins. That is everybody that I have designated as an OT admin in Outcome Tracker. I'm going to send out an email to all those people probably later today or tomorrow when I upload this video onto YouTube with the link to this video that is this webinar and also an attachment of this handout. So, so that way people who couldn't attend will be able to have the materials and the video. So that handout is available for you right now, though, in the handout section. So there's that. Are there any more questions? Doesn't seem like there are any more questions. Noreen, I hope you were able to get the handout, but if not, you'll get it in your email. And probably by tomorrow. So if there are no more questions, then I think that's it for us. It was a shorter one. 2 quick things. Just because they're quick and easy to explain does not mean that they're not important. I think that they're important. Yeah, there we go. We're done. So there's going to be a short survey after I finish the webinar. If you can fill out the survey with your feedback, that would be really helpful for us. And then we're done. So then thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.